Started. It's about 6 o'clock. Why don't we do it? Thank you guys for all being here, for being on time here to the first Passive House Massachusetts meeting of 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. We made it. We're here.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's been a long going, but we did it. Last year was a fantastic year, I think, for Passive House. With despite everything else going on, we saw record growth in Passive House projects here in the state, including many Phius projects. So, Kat, congratulations there on that. And to a lot of the folks here who have been involved in those projects on the project teams, a lot of them are going up right now. So we'll, kind of have, I'm sure, some ribbon cuttings in the year to come. But it's been great. And this coming year, we're really looking forward to seeing that number jump up as well. I know with the mass save incentives continuing, a lot of projects are still sort of enrolling a lot of the multifamily projects are still enrolling in the incentives and still sort of getting the projects off the ground. So I'm looking forward to that number keep going. This last year, we spent a lot of time talking about how Passive House and renewable energy can combine for net zero energy. Which we talked a lot about at our symposium and through a lot of the monthly meetings. And we're going to continue that conversation here this year, but we're going to add in kind of a new theme. And we want to spend a lot of the year talking about retrofits, how we can apply a lot of these same concepts we've been talking about in the past to existing buildings. We know if we're going to meet the climate obligations that we have to meet, both that the state has set and also just goals that we want to meet to get down to zero carbon, we need to address the buildings that are around already and figure out a way to retrofit them to perform just as well as a new Passive House building would. So tonight, we're thrilled to welcome Catherine Klingenberg, Executive Director of Phius, to tell us a little bit about how Phius is approaching retrofits in regards to the Passive House standard. So I'll turn it over to her in a moment. As always, this session is being recorded, so you guys can see it on our website later for reference. You can also see all our past meetings. So if you missed any, you can just go to phmass.org and find them in our video library. You'll also see a list of all our upcoming events. We do have a Passive House Lunch and Learn in 2 weeks on Windows, so you can register for that. It's on Thursday, the 20th, I believe, at noon. And then, of course, we'll have another meeting back here the second Tuesday of February. But once again, thank you guys for being here. During the presentation, feel free to use the chat room to ask questions and discuss the topic, and we'll have open Q&A at the end. For now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kat, though. Take it away.
Hey, Aaron, can I ask you a favor?
Yes, please.
Before I get started? So I'm not a terribly great multitasker on Zoom. So if you see anything pop up in the chat, if you could monitor and mention any relevant comment, question, that would be great.
We'll do, definitely. And what I'll do is we can answer a lot of questions at the end. And if anybody has anything that, you're talking about at the moment, I can jump in with. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I'm super excited to be here tonight via Zoom room, and the team, they are all very excited too. They're all saying hi to Mass. That was the message that I got from the office. So, I think the feeling is mutual, Aaron. I think everybody is having a really good sense about 2022, given all the good stuff that has happened in 2021. So, very cool. And thank you for having me. So Phius for retrofit projects. How are we approaching retrofit within the Phius suite of certifications? That's essentially what I'm going to mainly will talk about, but I will also talk about a little bit about the stuff that we're working in the background with the RMI on and the DOE, the industrialized retrofit, how that is shaping up. Okay, so let's just jump right in. And for those of you who are CPHCs, this session will earn you a learning unit, CEU, self-reported, and you'll get the code at the end of the presentation. So done with that. And with that, before I start talking about retrofits, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that Phius actually has rebranded. Some of you might have not seen our posts on social media. And for those of you who didn't make it to the conferences here in October in Tarrytown, we have set out to come forward with a new brand. Obviously, we have a new logo, and that was prompted by all the incredible learnings over the last 10 years and the clear shift towards zero energy, and that zero now is really within reach. And with that, there are a whole bunch of other areas beyond the building envelope that we would like to tackle, and we would like to come up with like design guidelines for our professionals. So that really was the impetus. But that all said, no matter how much we expand or how many other aspects we like to bring into the certification and design system, same Phius, same technical focus, science first, building science and quality assurance. So no worries, we're not going anywhere. We're sticking to our guns. And maybe also just a little bit to the logo. We went through a pretty intense process last year. The logo, as you can hopefully still see, still hangs on to the P, to the passive building design. But it is now the teal color, which symbolizes renewal and revival. It is a mixture between green and blue, earthy stuff too. Sustainability looks a little bit like a nautilus. And as you can see, the loop is kind of folding back on itself. And that is very clearly front and center, moving the whole systems design that we are kind of embarking on here. So with that, most of you know our mission, but again, back to our rebranding, that mission has evolved over the years, and we're now very clearly on the path to zero and carbon neutrality in our system. And passive building, we all agree this is a core tenet of everything we do, is the main design strategy to get to that carbon neutrality in the best possible way. And so the expanded Phius vision that comes from all these learnings and from the progress towards zero with passive at the core is essentially building a zero carbon future together. So building as an expanded, not just the building itself, but also the adjacent systems such as the energy grid, microgrids, whatever have you, that factors into zeroing out our operational carbon and our embodied carbon in our buildings. Okay, so with that, we took that as an opportunity, the whole rebrand, also to reorganize all of our certification marks. They had gotten a little unwieldy over the years, so we have new logos. All our consultants, they will soon be put on notice. We're coming out with a new website within like a month and a half here. Everybody's working very hard on it. So by that time, beginning of March, all of the assets should be flipped over and should be updated. So this is where we're going with this, like the Nautilus kind of P logo that we have now incorporated in all of our certification marks. So in 2021, you might recall that we took a pretty important step forward. In 2018, we were still kind of like trying to nudge people towards zero because we felt it wasn't really within reach yet. So at that point, we had decided like we have the Phius core certification, which was basically our original passive house certification. And we established this kind of like middle tier of Phius Plus 2018, which kind of made the source energy target a bit harder to achieve. So essentially halfway to zero. And then the Phius Plus Source Zero certification, we've had that for a long time, but it didn't really grow much. So in 2021, like somehow these 3 years made a huge difference. And we flipped the switch. We decided that this halfway to zero really doesn't make much sense and that zero really is within reach. And we had observed that our zero certification actually started growing pretty quickly and pretty like dramatically as well. Still a small portion of the overall certifications, but it's about getting to like 10% or so now, and is developing also somewhat like a hockey stick curve, which is really great to see because, as most of you know, we really have to get to zero and probably like absolute zero because, yeah, political will has not necessarily been present until recently, and we have fallen behind in our carbon reduction goals overall. So what we are left with in 2021, we're left with our original Phius Core certification and with our Phius Zero certification. So we dropped the source zero term also for clarification, because most people are completely confused by it. We also want to start talking to the broader general public, and people just didn't understand the term, and it doesn't really necessarily add much. It's still the same certification. So for simplification and clearer communication, we just switched to Phius Zero. Oh yeah, and I had the slide in here just to give you a little bit of an idea where the Phius Zero certification is headed. So about like 10%, no, not 10%, less, 1%. Oh, my math brain, it's late in the day. So not that great yet, but hopefully soon we will get to the 10% mark. Okay, so that all said, over the last 2 years, really, like certifications have ramped up like crazy, and the numbers that I showed during the conference in Terrytown were actually way too small. We tallied everything up at the end of the year, and we found that we actually are at around like 1,500,000 square meters and 16 million square feet of submitted projects within the Phius program all time. So that makes about like 1,000 plus projects in North America and elsewhere in the world too, but they are still a fairly small percentage. So in graph form, this looks like this. So if you look at the right graph here, brand new, hot off the press, just got this from James, from our certification manager. We're approaching like, roughly, or at least projecting, if the growth trend holds true, about like close to 30 million square feet by the end of 2020. So 2022, sorry. And that confirms absolutely what Aaron was saying in his opening, that we all have a good feeling about the next year to come. So, and then also on the left-hand side, that was very interesting too. We've been kind of like looking at the different regions around the country, and there's interest bubbling up everywhere. Some of you might have heard that in 2023, we're going to take our PhiusCon down to Houston to activate the South as well, hot and humid region. So hopefully we'll see a lot more uptake down there, because Texas really needs it. But for the time being, really the Northwest is taking, the Northeast is taking the cake here. The exponential growth, and especially within Mass over the last year, has been unbelievable. So, and the really cool part that comes out of these incentive programs, the incentive programs that enlist and fund projects, they are really good about getting data back. And the first initial projects that were funded by the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, the cost data that has come back on these projects has been absolutely phenomenal. Like, so basically 1.5 to like almost 3% additional cost. And most developers who we have been talking with, they say, well, this is not even contingency. Now, the not so good news is, since we're talking about retrofit, that's quite a bit of a different story, because retrofits tend to be custom and they tend to be more expensive. And that is maybe one of the most important cost hurdles that are still out there. And we'll talk about this when we get to the RMI, DOE, ABC collaborative conversation at the end. Okay, so and the good thing about, again, these incentive programs, even if it is initially now for like mostly new construction and a few zero energy and a few retrofit projects mixed in here, we do collect data. We have excellent results in terms of like performance compared to measured. And that data hopefully will come out of the Mass Safe incentive program soon as well. And it is starting to come out of the Buildings of Excellence program that NYSERDA ran for the last couple of years. The Phius share of those selected projects was 44%. And you can see on the right hand side, NYSERDA has published cost data and performance data already on their website, and they will continue to update it as they get measure data in. But at this point in time, Phius projects hands down perform the best at the lowest cost. So this is a really, really great proof of concept information and data that we were hoping would come in that way when we first started to refine the passive building standards for climate and comfort and cost and so on and so forth. So it does make a big difference. I feel like we really have achieved our goal. We have a really great system here. So now to the certification programs. As we are rebranding, we're trying to reorganize and simplify that as well. So essentially, now we have two buckets. We have the new construction and the existing buildings bucket. And in the past, it was interesting because we had essentially just our Phius certification, and the existing building certification was a version with slight modifications of the existing certification program. People actually didn't really realize that we had a retrofit certification program. So we decided to make that very clear and to rebrand, and basically now call the retrofit certification program Phius Core Revive. And then if projects go to zero, then it would be called Phius Zero Revive. And that goes back to one of the early slides that I showed you. Now we only have these two tiers, like Phius Core. So essentially you are not required to go to zero. You meet all your targets on site with maybe a little bit of PV. And the Phius Zero, for that one, you would zero out your remaining operational energy. And you can do that by buying SRECs, by having on-site renewables, by community solar. So essentially we have those two tiers, Phius Core and then special expanded designation, Phius Core Revive. And so to the differences between those two tracks that we have. So both of them are performance-based, same thing, climate-specific, cost-optimized, comfort-optimized, custom targets for location and building typology, our signature three-prong framework for the design approach, space conditioning limits, and for the Revive program, different than for the new construction program, we have allowances for thermal bridges, or for conditions that you just really can't do anything about, like existing shading conditions, existing non-existing solar access, any of those factors. So, but the air tightness threshold and the source energy limit, they stay. So as we have gotten more and more involved in the RMI Realize effort of bringing the Energiesprong exterior retrofit, industrialized exterior retrofit approach over to the US, and as people have started on these pilot projects, they started to learn lessons. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from those teams that our quality assurance in some cases is really difficult to uphold. As for example, like people have started to exterior retrofit, panelized retrofit multifamily buildings with people in place. And they found it extremely difficult to do the whole blower door test while people are in the building. So we're actually working on a modification to our regular workbooks that go with all of these, with our different certification programs. So that retrofit workbook modification is in the works, and what we can allow to deviate from it, that will be informed by actually the work that we're doing with the Realize and ABCC collaborative with RMI. And I'll talk about this in a second, a little bit more. So essentially, again, we have Phius Core Revive, Phius Zero Revive, and then those tracks, whichever one you pick under your retrofit program, then different workbooks for quality assurance apply. We have a quality assurance workbook currently for single family. We have one currently for multifamily, and we have one currently for non-residential projects. So that's how the certification currently is organized. So I mentioned the start of the certification process is the design methodology and the optimized targets. For those, we have calculators. And for those of you who are certifying with Phius, you're familiar with those calculators that live, well, it's actually only one, lives on our website. And these are a couple of screenshots of the Phius 2021 performance criteria calculator. And this is to show you that basically the calculator has a toggle, one for new construction and one for retrofit. So if you have not done a retrofit project before, you might have not known that that is the case, but it's really just as simple as flipping the switch in the calculator. And as of right now, the base targets are the same for new construction as well as retrofit, except if you go through the certification process, there will be an assessment of these allowances for existing thermal bridges that I mentioned. So that is that. And then for non-residential projects, same thing. There's another toggle up on top of the calculator. You toggle to non-residential from residential, and then again, you can toggle from new construction to retrofit, and you get your base targets again. And same rule applies, allowances for existing thermal bridges based on your specific project that you're working on and your specific conditions. All right, so what are we doing about decarbonization strategy in general and embodied carbon? We get this question recently a lot, as a lot of policymakers are switching from an EOI metric, energy use intensity, energy use per square foot, to a carbon equivalent. And so we're working on getting that carbon equivalent. We already calculated essentially the source energy target. If you can translate that into a carbon equivalent, but it is not yet part of our output in the WFI passive file, but we're working on getting that in there as soon as we can. And for embodied carbon in materials, now this is an important topic that has come to the forefront. Obviously, as if you look at essentially retrofitting the entire building stock of the United States, the share of embodied carbon becomes really significant. And we need to have measures how to assess it and how to reduce it and how to minimize it. The tech committee has been discussing how to best do that within our certification framework. And they have so far rejected specific carbon accounting because it adds a whole other layer of modeling and additional work and cost. And it is at this point really not super accurate either. So at this point, the tech committee is debating essentially tables that will shortcut the process of having to calculate your embodied carbon, but give you a table of materials that are a better selection than others. And the same will be true for HVAC systems, refrigerant choices, and blowing agents and insulation. So that's where we're at this moment. And that logic will kind of also go together with the ADOR cost, a concept that Graham has come up with, and I'll talk about it a little bit more here in a second. So essentially what we're trying to say is, like, if you have a budget for a project, because most of our economy right now is running on fossil fuels, essentially the dollar amount of the budget that will translate more or less into a carbon equivalent. So we're trying to leverage that to come up with a score that is simplified and easier to achieve. So this is one of the winners of the design competition that we've had at the conference this year, a retrofit and partially new construction in Oak Park in Illinois. Really nice example. Historic building also was quite difficult to retrofit. And they didn't just stop at the regular retrofit. They went with Phius Plus Source Zero. So that's the current label. If they had entered the certification process, now the new label would be Phius Zero Revive. So very cool project, nicely done. Okay, so now this is the existing certification for retrofits that we've always had. Now we have renamed. And because over the last couple years, we've learned quite a few lessons through this industrialized retrofit project with RMI, and our community has given us a lot of feedback, as I mentioned before, regarding existing quality assurance requirements that we have and that make it really, really difficult. Some even have argued, like, I cannot go to these levels of envelope upgrades. Why can I not just put a bit more PV on my existing project to zero out my source and therefore also be carbon efficient, right? So all really good arguments. So as a consequence of that, independent even from the RMI and realized industrialized retrofit research that we're doing with DOE, we internally decided to create a Phius Revive pilot project to reevaluate these frameworks that we have put in place. Like, do we really need that level of upgrade in the envelope? Because we all know, like, we have an incredible retrofit goal here. If we really want to do this for the entire United States, we're looking at an immense amount of carbon that will be necessary to be spent on envelope upgrades. So if we actually really do this and we're trying to retrofit the entire existing building stock, we need to come up with a way to optimize those two goals: to reduce operational carbon, to reduce and zero out, become net zero ready, and to reduce the amount of carbon that we're spending on the envelope. So big question, our general Phius retrofit program, can we back out from our traditional performance-based approach? And can we find other criteria that allow us to not to cheapen up the envelope, but to reduce it, to find another sweet spot in the process? So, and under the DOE Advanced Construction Collaborative with the RMI, led by RMI, actually, the next slide shows this. So we're part of this ABC collaborative. And the goal is to figure out how to optimize and make the building industry more efficient and faster, and to be able to actually deliver these incredible numbers of carbon retrofits that we have to complete. So the first portion of this DOE grant is aiming at writing a guidance report. We've done a ton of modeling, including like a whole bunch of national labs, PNNL, NREL. They all have done an amazing amount of work to lay the groundwork to be able to judge from there, like how many buildings do we have, like basically an audit, like what kind of buildings do we have, who is the biggest like operational carbon offender and how does this all play out in different climate zones. So this project is really, really ambitious. It's not just like going to say like, okay, like we have most buildings in climate zone 5, and this is where we have the greatest potential of reduction. We want to do this for the entire United States, and we want to do this for all climate zones. So this is where the Phius Revive pilot came in, and we are tasked with writing this industry guidance report based on the modeling results from all the different team members. And so unfortunately a bit, and I'm going to, that is my personal opinion at this point, it seems that people are falling back onto like a simplified approach, like prescriptive packages that are very much slimmed down, like very much identified by using how to best say this, like the traditional approach of like, where's the point of diminishing returns? And we all know that if you look at all the synergies between the systems in the process of decarbonization, including the grid and the benefits to the grid of a passive building, that cost benefit calculation changes. But at this point, the labs decided to really just draw a boundary that excludes benefits to the grid, which in my opinion is short-sighted. Anyway, we're trying to incorporate that cost of benefit to the grid, like for example, load shifting in passive buildings, and also lost my train of thought. Benefit to, well, the occupants, of course, resilience, and so on and so forth. So I'm pretty sure I will come back to this. So that leads me to Phius Revive pilot. And this is where there has been a little bit of confusion. Folks thought that because we presented on it at the conference, they thought that the Phius Revive pilot was already a fully baked certification, but for the record, it is all research at this point. There is no established certification process. The pilot is there to establish just that. So let's just take a look at the immense scale that we're looking at here for retrofitting projects. The potential retrofit market is gigantic. As you can see right here, way more impactful than new construction. It's new construction is like 1/40th of what we have in existing homes. And the maybe not so good news is that the biggest chunk of those square feet that need to be brought into the 21st century and need to be carbon neutral are single family homes. And as you all know, that is the most difficult typology that we're dealing with, because the small home encloses a relatively small area relative to surface. So it is essentially the biggest energy user as part of the entire typology study that NREL looked at. So, and then of course there are also the commercial buildings, but really the biggest contributor is a single family home. So we're kind of like have to sit with that for a little bit. That said, we are focusing on aggregating demand in the first round on multifamily buildings, because there are a lot of the similar typologies. They have good surface to volume ratio. They're often a simple geometry that can more easily be retrofitted from the outside and benefit from an industrialized panelization approach in terms of window wall panels, as well as exterior applied, potentially like individualized mechanical system units. So that's all being investigated. Not there yet. We're still in this first kind of like audit phase. So when we are looking at this new framework for the Revive pilot, we are open-minded. We're going to say like, well, maybe that performance-based approach is not the right one. That does not lead us to the right answer, because we need to rebalance the operational energy reduction and the related carbon, as well as the embodied carbon that goes into the envelope upgrade. So what are our main priorities that should govern how far we go with our envelope upgrades? So for one, it's already clear that we need like a really good quality assurance process that covers all phases. It's not going to be easy to, nobody will have all the money like to just like go all in and do a deep energy retrofit. That's not going to happen. So, and if that is not going to happen, then we need a really good quality assurance process. That is true for the implementation as well as for deciding which measures are your best bang for the buck and in what order are they best applied so that you get the most optimized result out of all of it. Back to our whole rebranding of the whole systems design, like here in this case, this is really, really crucial. So the most important probably measure that one has to consider right away from the get-go is that we have to set ourselves up that direct emissions cease soon. So quite a few jurisdictions have decided to ban gas, and they're not even investing in gas infrastructure anymore. But that potentially can set us up for like a real problem because if everybody all of a sudden goes and electrifies and the whole envelope upgrade argument really hasn't filtered through yet, we will create incredible peaks on the grid. And we will also increase our energy bills if we don't do anything to the envelope. So that direct emissions ceasing plan really needs to be thought out well. So, and it's fine to have a fuel switching strategy in my mind for the next 10 years. We don't have to get rid of gas right away. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, like when I was talking about decarbonization, my decarbonization slide earlier, Phius Core Revive still allows gas. Phius Zero Revive does no longer allow gas. So keep that in mind. So Phius Core will allow you to have like kind of like a phasing out of that of gas over a certain period of time. So then the critical loads, that was the other thing that was really important to us. So if you electrify, then you really should make sure, and that's kind of like almost like an equity thing, like shouldn't we all have the right to a building that if the grid goes out, which is very likely in the future because we're trying to do an incredible thing here with fuel switching an entire system, and it doesn't seem like anybody really has a clear vision when and how and where like there will be the shortfalls, right? So everybody's wildly getting started on it, and in all likelihood we will have outages, and then also the climate events are starting to be more and more severe, and we will have outages from that. So if we are electrifying, then really we should look at creating buildings that are not just resilient, but also that remain habitable so that you don't have to leave. And that means some on-site storage, like at least cover the most important functions in the buildings, either through like direct generation plus storage, or if you have a really big building, then you might need like the help of a microgrid. And then the last thing that was really important to us was that the project meets resilience criteria. So actually what I was just saying, like maintaining this habitability, that the renewable energy and storage is only a small portion, but the envelope can help us to set the stage for resilience and to minimize the energy that we need to keep ventilators running, to keep maybe like a couple plugs running so that you can charge your communication devices or whatever you consider like critical, fridge, whatever have you. So that was important to us as well. as part of the framework for the Phius pilot. And then as another guardrail, of course, so is the total cost. And we dubbed it the ADOR cost, which is short for the annualized decarbonization of retrofitted buildings cost. And that cost is calculated based on dollar value. And again, that goes back to the concept that I mentioned earlier, that right now our entire economy is run on fossil fuel. So essentially, $1 is an equivalent to carbon emissions. So we can use that as a proxy at this point in time. And we can use that for all these different positions that we would like to determine the cost and the carbon impact by. So the direct energy cost, the energy that we have to buy from a utility, the direct building retrofit measure cost, material and labor. Then there's the social cost of carbon upfront, embodied, and the social cost of carbon operating. Now, we're assuming that there is some form of a carbon tax coming, and that is actually true already in quite a few jurisdictions, like New York City and Washington, D.C. They have already initiated the building energy performance standards, which basically say like your existing building has to be X better in 4 years, and then we come after you again, and if you don't do it, you pay a big fine. And this is it's essentially a little bit of a trick. Instead of doing carbon tax, it's a penalty. It's the equivalent of a carbon tax, if you will. And then last but not least, here in those bullets, we have the energy system transition cost. And again, for all of these different items, we're using basically the dollar as the kind of indicator for how much carbon is in these different positions. So as you go through thinking through the design of the retrofit of a building, you will want to calculate this add-on cost. Now, this is a super simple example right here from it's a single family building. So essentially what we're looking at is like, okay, so if you don't do anything, you will continue to buy energy. So that has a certain cost associated with it. You will emit carbon through this operation, and we're assuming that there's a cost associated with that. And then you have maintenance that you will continue to spend fossil fueled dollars on. Once you calculate all that baseline over the years, then that gives you essentially the cost that you should not exceed in your investment in your building. So ideally, your investment will be equal or better than that baseline. And at that point, it will actually start making you money. So this is all totally theoretical, and I apologize for these like word heavy slides. This is all still very much like hot off the press. But of course, we don't like staying in the lab too long. We like pilot programs, pilot projects. I wanted to show you real quick here at the end, one of our pilots right now. It's super exciting, and it's totally proof of concept that this framework, this new framework could work. So this is a project in Washington, D.C. It's a sister building to the Watergate building. And I think a lot of people have an image of the Watergate building. I'm not showing a photo here. Keep the clients private, but a same architect, essentially all concrete. The building has not significantly been upgraded since the 70s when it was built. Concrete balconies that go all the way from the inside to the outside, single pane glazing, aluminum frames, boilers that are on their last leg. I mean, it's basically the best possible candidate for something like this. And they are looking at like some heavy fines if they don't do anything by, I think, 2026 in the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C., like something in the order of like 3 million. So they were faced with like, okay, now what? And they came to us and they said, like, can you design us a strategy? Now, that the building hasn't really been significantly upgraded is really a good thing, because the energy score that they're working from is essentially 1. It's a tent. And they also have some other deficiencies that are really interesting because they need to get fixed. They're interesting for us because it's kind of like almost like an anyhow cost. Like they would have to do that anyway, and we can help them fix it by also improving the envelope. So these balconies, everybody loves their balconies. We touched on like, well, how about we cut them off? How about we can close them? And people about had a heart attack. So that was a total no. But these balconies have water issues. They drain back to the building. And in doing so, they have started to rot out the concrete. And these are all post-tension slabs. So it's a real structural concern that the water continues to erode the balconies. And so it actually helped our argument to say like, well, let us help you with your thermal bridge. Let us over insulate your balcony. And while we're doing that, we can create the appropriate drainage that you never had. We'll fix your structural problem. And with like 2 inches of ephes, you're in business. And they were totally with it. So that was really cool. And then, but of course, that was not the only thing. We looked at the whole thing holistically, basically boiler replacement. Their boilers are about dead. Their hot water system, like all is gas run. So if you try to electrify this it's a really big building. It's 250,000 square feet. If you try to electrify without doing anything to the envelope, it became clear very quickly, it's impossible. It's just like, so essentially what they would have had to do was to replace the existing boilers with already outdated technology, i.e. more gas boilers. So what we were trying to do was to set them up so that they could actually replace their gas boilers with up-to-date heat pump systems and meet their peak after they would gradually upgrade the envelope, and that would include the windows. So that's essentially what you're seeing here. We broke out all the different positions of upgrade opportunity, and then we came up with a phased plan for them that over time would continue to reduce the peak load. So now the first order of business is to replace those boilers because they're about dead. We can't wait for 7 years to replace all the windows around the entire perimeter. So we came up with a really good strategy here and basically said like, well, we will size the heat pump replacement systems for your future peak load after we put in place all the envelope upgrades over the next, let's say, 7 years or so. We supplement the modern heat pump technology with a small, cheap packaged boiler. So we basically use that fuel switching strategy over the next 7 years, and it's already clear, like DC will also outlaw gas probably within the next 10 years. So investing in all new gas would be like, they would be stranded with expensive assets that will not be useful into the future. So this was a really crucial move to enable them to actually replace the boilers with heat pump technology, including hot water. So all these different bars, you can see like the red one is the cost, the red line, as you add up all the different measures, and the green bar is the energy reduction. So the cool thing was we were able to get them down to 70%, basically reduce their energy consumption by 70%, basically making them qualify for what that building energy performance standard has already mapped out over the next 10 years they want people to do. So if people only do incremental steps, like what they are asked to do by the city of DC, 20% by 26 and another 20% by whatever, they miss all these opportunities. Like if this is not planned out from the get-go. So, and I will not lie to you, this was hard work, and we learned a ton, but also we were really hopeful in the end that this can be done, that it can be financed over a period of time, and that we can get everything we really think we want and need from that improvement, including the resilience/habitability for the building, including renewables on site that will make sure that critical loads are still met. We will be resilient in terms of like, should the power really go out, we have created resilience calculations that we hope, based on these kind of like case studies, that we can turn into calculators for you guys. If you are starting to embark on these larger retrofit projects or small retrofit projects, that you can actually easily kind of like see if your building actually meets that resilience criterion. And those different kind of like guardrails will allow you to back out the envelope upgrades and minimize, therefore optimize, the carbon that we need to invest in the envelope. So that is the really good news here. Last but not least, this will require a new commissioning process also, new players in the design, and maybe we're starting at the really complicated end with like a really big building. But if we can do it for a really big building, we can do it for a small building. Now the financing part, that is still like a hard one. Probably not for these really big projects, because there are already people who are lining up to become essentially something like an energy service provider. They would finance the improvements into the building and then get paid back by the savings. As I was saying earlier with the add-on cost, as long as your score for the add-on cost is equal or better than the baseline of like, if you continue to operate your building as is, plus the maintenance that you have already figured into your budget that you have to spend, as long you're equal or better than that, your building will make money. So that's why that add-on cost is so important, in addition to any kind of like resilience criterion to identify the level of envelope upgrade necessary. So in summary, key requirements for this new Revive pilot program, whenever we will get to establish it in more formal terms, is a very detailed quality assurance process that covers all the different phasing, that helps folks to come up with that basis of design for the owner. Our main goal is electrification, direct emissions cease as soon as possible. And we definitely want to make sure that the habitability is there, that we will cover the critical loads in case of outages or extreme weather events. And what we have to address is a land use, like maybe the building should be torn down, something like that. We want to decarbonize and really, we probably need to get at some point to absolute zero in terms of decarbonization. We can't do it today, but we do our best to work our way forward on that front. We have to address cost, finance, and equity. Right now, this is kind of crazy. Like really, I'm not entirely sure that these BEPS standards, that it's really fair to put the upgrade cost on the homeowner / the condo owner. This is a big lift, so we really need to think about this. Resilience for sure, we talked about this, help and quality, getting rid of existing deficiencies like asbestos or lead or whatever that is, upgrading the ventilation system. Like I'm in a 80s condo building and the ventilation is horrible. And then last but not least, we really have to concern ourselves with phase planning to access the synergies between the phases over time to optimize our design. So all in all, if you're a systems thinker and systems designer, this is a lot of fun, but also a lot of work. But we've shown in with this particular project in DC that there's a good path forward. And so that's my hopeful message, that, and especially once we get like the industrialized panelization up and running, and maybe you guys should invite Tim McDonald next, because he's working very closely with the ABC program on that portion. And then you should maybe dive into the solutions for the individual measures that and the processes that he has pioneered. All right, so I hope that was not too heavy. Here's the verification code if you'd like to report your CEU unit. And yeah, with that, building a zero carbon future together. That's our mission for the next 10 years. And thank you for being here and for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Kat. It was really good to hear more about, well, what Phius is up to, but more about the revised program specifically. We have some questions in the chat room, so I'll go ahead and read some of those out for you. And folks, feel free to, add in additional chats, or at this point, you can also use the raise hand feature, and I can unmute you so you can ask your question directly to Kat. Let's go through the chat room here. So first off, just on the last slide, you were just kind of showing the summary of the key requirements. And obviously you want to reduce on-site combustion use, but there was a question: is emergency generation, there's an exception for that? Is that accounted for?
Oops.
How are you?
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was trying to go back.
Oh yes. So how are you? So does emergency generation backup power factor into this?
Yes, that would be on-site renewable energy storage or microgrid backup, but not a generator. I mean, if you want to have a generator, again, like keep in mind, like in all likelihood, like that whole fossil fuel thing will go away. That option will go away in about 10 years. So don't build it into the system as if you're going to be able to use it indefinitely. It'll be a stranded asset in 10 years, in my opinion.
Right. A note to go back to the credit code. So folks want to get that down. Too quick. There we go. Valuable information right there. All right. There's a question, actually much earlier on in the presentation, we were talking about some of the cost data. Really good news there. And I'm glad you're showing some of those Massachusetts projects. We've seen really good numbers there. The question was a little bit more about how do you see the learning costs? How is that impacting this? Is that, kind of the big upfront costs, is the teams to sort of learn how to do this, and then later on, as they do more of these, that's what's bringing the cost down? Do you see a similar pattern happening for these retrofits? I wonder if you could comment on that at all.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely will see the same pattern. I mean, it's like, so the Phius team is no slouch, but we worked hard on this DC project. And we learned a whole bunch of lessons. And if people start on their first project, we will do our best to kind of bake that into a template and into like a quality assurance process so that people don't have to relearn those lessons. But hey, every project is different, right? So my guess is we will see the same learning curve. Yes. Great.
Thanks. We're going to go here to Jeffrey. Go ahead.
Hey, Katrina, I guess I was the one who asked the question about learning, and it's actually a little bit more expansive than that, in that there's this learning and experience kind of go hand in hand. And so I read a Stephen Winter's study about project teams that were working together. And on the first project, they experienced the kinds of cost premiums that you talked about. But by the second or third project, they were actually producing results at below traditional construction costs. So it's about continuity from project to project and learning from your previous projects. And if we live in a design world of design, bid, revise, you lose all of that stuff and you lose that learning. And so somehow, and this is difficult, but it's the value of having essentially cohesive teams from project to project to reduce these costs. And this has been proven, and I'm looking at Hank Keating right now because he's on my screen as part of this. And I know he knows about lean and lean thinking. This is the fundamental precept, or sorry for my language, but it's a fundamental assumption of continuous improvement and how do you spread that? So I guess that's kind of what the question was focused on, and how do we, and what kind of policy decisions can we pursue that reinforce that learning from other sectors of the economy? Because by any measure that I've seen, the construction industry is lagging way, way behind.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Like we need, well, if we could codify lean or give people better guidance how to structure their projects to incorporate it, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people just still go by the regular template, right? So I would also say that in the same vein, there are new business models emerging that people are trying out. They don't exist yet, but they see the opportunity. So especially for this retrofit market, I was talking about this energy services agency. There are now consulting firms that are essentially offering the entire process. They have the mechanical designers, they have the envelope designers, they do it all in-house, they finance the upgrade, and then they go into contract with the project to basically get paid back through the savings. And they want to bring it all in-house. The few companies who are trying to do that, they put up a website and they said they want to do that, but I'm pretty sure that they don't know how to do that yet, because it's not that easy, right? That's exactly what we're kind of trying to spell out in our kind of case study here. So, but that said, once people learn how to do that, I think it'll be really great.
So that focuses on the commercial side, the larger projects, multifamily.
Yes.
But by a factor from your data, 20-1 is on the single family side of it.
And that scares the heck out of me. I have no answers for you on that one. Yeah.
Okay. So basically my thoughts on that is it's got to be by project type. Okay, it's what people do when they do renovations. I live in a house that's an 1840 antique colonial, and I have gone through a process, and I have cut my energy bills from about 11 or 12,000 a year in oil costs, oil-based costs. Now they're down to about 4,500 a year. And 80 to 90% of that's electricity based. And I subscribe to 100% renewable energy generator. Not perfect.
Yep.
All sorts of issues around it. I get it. But at least I know I'm only spending about $400 a year on oil.
Well, and that is
So
really great for a single family home. Seriously, those will be the difficult ones.
But that was a step by step. So I think that part of this, and I'm happy to, please engage me. I'll be happy to contribute to this effort, because
Be great. Yeah.
got
Thank
some
you.
ideas.
Great.
Hank, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Kat, this has been fantastic. What you're investigating and what you're tackling is just incredible. I've got a zillion questions, but I want to start with first a comment on what Jeffrey said about the contracting community not being ready to tackle this. I want to simply add to that, the design community is not ready either. You are, but there are nowhere near enough design professionals, architects and engineers who have been trained in this building science to do this at all. And when you bring it into the rehab side, it gets much more complicated.
Yeah, you need it on steroids.
Yeah, and I'm interested in whether you might be thinking about trying to make it simpler. You talk about working on tables for embodied carbon. And I think that's a great idea for materials. I mean, I think that at some point we have to, as an industry, get much more sophisticated in doing whole building cost assessment analytics for embodied carbon, but we need simple tools to start with. So I applaud you for that. when do you think those tools might be available?
Oh, we're working on it this year for sure. Like I can't tell you if it's first quarter or mid-year, but
Great.
we're feeling the time pressure.
Yeah, excellent. And then along those lines, I'm wondering whether you've given any thought to the concept of some type of a checklist that designers and contractors can use when they start to evaluate the existing conditions of an existing building, because they're all so entirely different.
Mhm.
And there's going to be different kind of risks that are found in all kinds of different envelope conditions. And people, I think, are going to need at the outset, before they really get used to this, some type of a checklist. You should look for this, look for that. If you see this, note it.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that topic, we didn't do this DC project on our own. We had a really great engineering firm who is very versed in doing energy audits. And they also have worked with the city of DC to come up with the BEP standards. They have tested the modeling and what all went into it. So they were very familiar with that regulation that we were up against and that we were intending to meet. So they follow ASHRAE guidelines for energy audit level 1, 2, and 3. So that's essentially our baseline. We are going to try to modify those ASHRAE guidelines to do exactly what you just described. Basically add the passive concerns into it so that somebody will not forget those at crucial junctures. So that's what Graham is working on. I mean, I'm sure he has sleepless nights over that quality assurance protocol, which will include the certification, the design guidelines, the resilience calculator, and the ad hoc cost to simplify that calculation as kind of like guardrails.
Let me ask one more follow-up, and then I'm going to yield the floor. But I totally understand the need for doing a master plan and a phased view of how you're going to transition this building from where it is today to where it needs to get to. And maybe it's going to be a 7-year or 10-year plan, and maybe there's going to be an ESCO involved in trying to do that. It makes complete sense, but it feels awesomely overwhelming to think about how you engage the client and the contractors and the ESCOs and everybody in thinking about this as a 7 to 10-year plan and certifying it somehow, right?
Yes. So here's the thing. This was like a process with fits and starts and bruises. We got beaten up by their energy committee right and left because we were talking engineering talk and they had no idea what hit them. Like somebody wanted to fine them 3 million, and if they don't meet it, then even another 3 million. And they were in complete denial. First, they wanted to sue the city, and then even though they are all like down with like decarbonization and everything, but it seemed so overwhelming that they rather like went the path don't look up, right? So we had to go through the process of learning how to talk to them. We had a couple people on the committee. They said, like, you cannot talk like this to us. We don't understand this. Like, so they basically gave us a crash course in how to explain what we were going to do for them and why the 10% reduction of the really expensive, most expensive windows that we proposed, that seemed like a really bad investment, why that was also the air tightness barrier, the air tightness layer, and why that would result in more savings, and why that also would solve their comfort problems, and why that was also part of the problem that needed to be solved for the balconies and the structural issue, right? So once they understood all these things, they were so on board with everything. But it was a process, and I wish I could can that learning process of like how to communicate with people who are faced with that.
Yeah, amazing. Go to somebody else.
Tom, you had your hand up earlier. If you still have a question, you can go ahead and ask it now. They've
Thank
taken
you
a break.
much for your presentation. I heard this at one of my first Passive House meetings 3 years ago by Stephanie. We need more communication from the field to the office. And that diffuses the learning curve. You know, we can learn from each other's mistakes. What are we doing well? What are we, you know, what are our weaknesses? And you know, this is it's a political movement as much as anything, and we need to get this right. And if we're not doing it right in 3 or 5 years and comes back and these projects are failing, it's going to be tough to move forward. My background is in historic restoration. I know from hands-on experience that these projects are a totally different animal than new construction. The costs can be exorbitant. There needs to be complete field evaluation. There are circumstances. I was one of the early people out at Moran Square on that building, and you know, we were looking at the window openings, and I uncovered all kinds of situations with the brick, the openings that could lead to substantial cost. But if they're you know, noticed in the early stages, they can be accommodated for. And I think a lot of these retrofit buildings will have historic significance, which also raises the cost. But this communication from the field, I think I can learn as much from a carpenter, a restoration guy, what's going on as I can from any consultant. So I think we need to all share this. If there can be some kind of newsletter we can put together, or monthly communication about you know, hands-on experience, it would go a long way. Thank you.
I totally agree with you. Like, A, team building, and B, sharing lessons learned. Because I mean, this was one project we went through, right? Like, and we were in some ways lucky because, well, it has some, I don't know, not historic, but they wanted to hang on to the look. So we couldn't just do whatever we wanted. So there was that. And I think with like really historic buildings, I think we might just have to let them be and just accept the fact that we might have to make up elsewhere,
Right.
for them still be able to be, not fall apart by like aggressive energy retrofits. So.
Thank you.
We had a question in the chat from John. Feel free to add into this question John, if you want to say more about it. I was wondering about how there's relaxations for thermal bridges. Are there similar relaxations for the airtightness requirement for single family units?
Nope, they're not.
Hi, Kat. Happy New Year.
Hi.
See behind me, I'm trying to practice on my own home. It was built in 1979. I'm trying to revive it, but there are some issues, you know, because that was back in the day. But I'm having a lot of fun. I'm doing a lot of lessons learned, and I'm doing some cool things. And it is costly. There's no doubt about it. And that's the problem. I'm going overboard because it's my own house, but I'm learning in the process, which I think is very valuable for any consultant, rater, verifier, or builder, all of which I've dabbled in all.
Yeah, you're the super consultant.
I make a lot of super mistakes on some things, and here's one of them. But why are you holding? You know, I came into this house and I did a blower door in it. In fact, this is the first house I built in 1979. I got out of high school at 12 o'clock every day, and I came to work for the builder on my mom's house. This was my family home, and you know, I learned a lot and went to college and learned more. And then, you know, here I am 40 years later, I'm tearing the place apart. But, you know, I have new windows going in, but I have some thermal bridges, but not to relax I am attacking the outside. So I am addressing a lot of the envelope. I'm using Sega tapes and things like that. And I'm hoping, I haven't done my blower door yet. I'm getting close because I want to see kind of where I am. But I know that Phius has their retrofit program. They get about 1 ACH. They give you a little, you know, from 0.6 to 1 ACH. And, you know, because that is okay. And then you can be blessed by their organization. And there should be, you know, some kind of relaxed thing, I think, in that thing, because we just, you know, anytime you're not starting from a brand new structure, you are stuck with what you have to some degree.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And that was one of the issues that had been brought up. Like aside from doing the whole blower door test on like a multifamily building when people are still inside, right? So that's exactly the kind of stuff we're looking at. So the only reason why we're not relaxing the air tightness right now is because we did some pretty intensive modeling to come up with the air tightness that we have right now. And our air tightness standard is based, other than fee, on the actual square footage and the actual leakiness and the relationship of risk for mold and deterioration. So the team right now is just not comfortable yet to relax it without further studying if it is safe. So that's, I can tell you that, but you could reach out and maybe become part of the pilot, because I think that would actually help you. So again, for single family homes, the same logic applies. We're trying to reduce the envelope upgrades as much as possible while meeting all the other goals.
Well, I was at 11.5 ACH when I did my blower door before I took a
Oh,
hammer.
wow.
Yeah, so
So lots of room for
I think I'm
improvement.
gonna make some substantial savings, for sure. And I'm, you know, I'm really trying to get down there, but it'd just be, there should be some, I mean, I'm gonna reduce a lot of mold chance and all these other problems for sure. And you can do that by still not having to get all the way down to 0.6 or lower based on your, you know, square
Well,
footage.
we're not at 0.6 anymore either. So
Fine.
I don't know. Yeah, you know. So yeah.
All right, we have a question here from Stephen. I'm going to go to you and unmute you. Oh,
Thank you.
are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks. Sorry for asking what's probably a very basic and dumb question. I was eating dinner and making dinner through part of this, but I also took some pictures of screenshots of the slides in the beginning. I think that you said that there was already an existing component of the Phius program that focused on renovation projects that most people weren't aware of. And I guess that's question one. And then question two is, I'm looking at the slide for Phius Core Revive and Phius Zero Revive, and I see some high-level thoughts about the framework with space conditioning limits and air tightness and source energy limits. I guess I'm not entirely clear. Are these things available and established somewhere that the general public can go to review, or are these yet to be released and are part of what have been influenced by this DC project effort, and the components of them, like the specific details, are forthcoming?
So not a dumb question at all. It's confusing, right? So we're rebranding to make clear that we do have a retrofit program, and hence breaking out the program by itself with a new name. So Phius Revive is the new program for retrofit projects, and it has always been in existence. It's the same one. And I showed you those calculators. You might have been making dinner right at that moment, but you can find that standards calculator for the performance targets on our website. And depending on the toggle, whichever you choose, it will spit out those performance targets. They are well established. They've been used for many years now. And the air tightness requirement, 0.7 cubic feet per minute per square foot, if I'm not mistaken, at this point in time, is also established. And all those rules for the certifications, if you really want to go through it, you will find in the certification handbook that is also available on our website for download.
Okay, thanks.
Hank, we can go back to you here now.
There. So, well, I'm gonna just crow a little bit and say that I'm living in my passive house and I haven't had the heat on yet. Today it was 11 degrees and sunny, still needed no heat whatsoever. You still have to be, you can't even dress too heavily. But I want to go back to the question of the ESCOs. I really feel like ESCOs, energy service companies could well be a huge part of the answer for financing these types of retrofits. But I'm interested in the idea that we're tackling so much when we say we're going to ultimately transition a building like this to all electric. We're not necessarily going to be able to, specifically even in a place like Boston, reduce the electric costs, which are through the roof. I mean, the rule of thumb we have is if you do a deep energy retrofit and convert to all electric from gas, you will save a lot of energy, but you may not save any money. So how does an ESCO get involved when there's no money to be made? You can save energy, but saving money is a different matter.
Well, Jeff has something to say on that one. I would say that that equation will change once gas gets outlawed or oil very quickly.
It could
Jeff?
well change. It could well change too with the social cost of carbon becoming a real cost.
That's exactly right. So this is what we saw in our DC project, right? Because essentially the penalty, that's what that is. It's a carbon tax, a hidden, well, whatever, camouflaged carbon tax. And once you figure that one in, the picture looks very different.
Right. And how were you working with a specific social cost of carbon, and were they different for embodied versus operational?
No, we didn't. So we haven't done the add-up calculation yet. The first phase was basically strategy. It's selling the building on it, and the carbon cost. We basically took the penalty from the city. We haven't even looked at the carbon cost for embodied yet. So that's the next step. Once they give us the green light and they want to go ahead, then we're going to formulate all that out.
Very interesting. You know, we just went through something like that, although I never got to look at the actual calculations. With the 3-year plan through the Mass Save program, we've been pushing through the process for a real cost, social cost of carbon. And at the very last minute, we were told that they'd recalculated it, and it went from $128 per ton to just under $400.
Yeah, it's pretty outrageous.
Gonna have to wrap up here as we reach 7:30. Obviously, this is a discussion that can go on, and it's going to continue this whole year for us as we talk about retrofits throughout these monthly sessions in different ways. We'll have case studies of retrofits in progress, see how they're going, see what challenges they're facing as they get towards certification. And we'll talk more about some of these standards as well. And I can't wait to get updates throughout the year from Kat on how the DC pilot is going. Before we wrap up, Kat, I'll let you have any final thoughts if you have anything or any words to say on how we get more passive house retrofits going here.
Ooh, buckle down, do it and share the lessons learned. Share as much as you can for the greater good of the community.
Couldn't agree more with sharing lessons
Cheers
learned.
to
that. Cheers indeed. Thank you everybody for being here. Kat, thank you for joining us as always. Can't wait till, I say this every time I'm seeing someone virtually now, but sometime in the future we can see you in person again. But to everybody,
great.
Happy New Year. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next month. Take care.
Thank you for having me.